What is up, my dudes? This is Trent with the Fantasy Football Dudes podcast. I have my week 6 waiver wire ads, early waiver wire ads. These will be coming out on Monday. I will have more on Tuesday on email if you want to sign up for that at www.thefantasyfootballdudes.com or head over to X at tffdudes. The Cowboys and Steelers game just ended. And before I get into my waivers, I just want to know how you people on the East Coast do this every single week, because it ended 12:59 East Coast time. It is 10:15 p.m. West Coast time. I really don't know how you do it, how you watch the games every single week. If you do, more power to you. Maybe you just wait for your favorite teams. Maybe it's just teams that you have some fantasy football relevance in there, so you stay up and watch it. But man, unless you don't work, then I guess it's really easy to do that. So NFL Week 6 teams on bye. I have the Kansas City Chiefs, Los Angeles Rams, Miami Dolphins, and Minnesota Vikings. And guys, before we get in these waivers, this is just common sense, I would say. Common fantasy sense. We're in bye weeks. Teams are, maybe 0-5. Maybe they're 1-4. Maybe they're 500. They need to string together some wins. Guys are going to get dropped. And if you're undefeated, if you only have 2 losses, 1 loss, you might have a little bit more, flexibility on the old bench. So, scoop some of these guys up going on bye week and put them on the end of the bench and, get rewarded later. I'm going to throw it over to my quarterbacks here right now, guys. And it seems weird to say. It seems really weird to have this guy on my list. But I have Trevor Lawrence as my quarterback right now. He is 47% rostered. Big game today, guys. Jordan talked about it, said it was a good matchup on our, week 5 preview show. 371 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, while adding 4 yards on 2 carries. He had a lot of time to throw the ball against this Colts defense. And next week, he's taking on the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams. Talking about Caleb Williams, guys, he is 59% rostered on Sleeper. Double check and see if you have him in your league, because I'm only under 55%. He barely didn't make the cut. So see if Caleb Williams is on your waiver wire. Played really good today. A lot of rookies played really well today. Jaden Daniels, he's been playing good for a while. Tyrone Tracy played really well for the New York Giants. Brian Thomas Jr. played really good. Kind of the rookies are kind of waking up, guys. They're getting there. Keon Coleman had 1 catch for a touchdown for, 50 yards. Brock Bowers, he's at it, playing really good. Looks really, really good at tight end. Maybe the only bright spot from that Raiders offense. But let's keep going to the quarterbacks, guys. Sorry about that. Next on my list, I have Kirk Cousins, 41% rostered. QB1 overall in the week, primetime Kirk Cousins. Maybe he finally put the nail in the coffin of the old primetime Kirk Cousins games. Can't play those games. Overtime shootout with the Buccaneers. Kirk Cousins going to Carolina this week. Maybe we finally have a Bijan game. We've had a lot of games that should be Bijan games. I don't know what the deal is, and feels like it could be panic time for Bijan Robinson owners. You got to play him, but he was a first-round pick. He's definitely haven't gotten your value. He is better than Breece Hall, I'll give you that, and Christian McCaffrey, but you're not getting what you wanted out of Bijan Robinson. And this is a perfect smash spot for Bijan. You can play Kirk Cousins too. Next on my list, this is a weird one here. Joe Flacco. And Flacco, can the guy get comeback player of the year 2 years in a row? He went second string to first. Sorry, he's not first string. But he puts the Colts in a really good position to win these games. He gets his receivers the ball, gets his playmakers the ball. 13% rostered. He has 7 straight games with multiple TDs dating back to week 13 last season. So Joe Flacco's slinging the rock. This guy's good. They have a lot of weapons there. Michael Pittman, he's getting involved. Josh Downs, he's getting involved. Alec Pierce is getting involved. Those two of those guys are on my list for later, but I'm not ready to give up that Anthony Richardson isn't the guy yet, okay? I don't think he's the guy now, but I don't think maybe he couldn't be later. And at the time, right now, you have to, if you're a wide receiver on the Colts, you got to be saying, like, this guy gets me the ball. This guy can throw it to me. This guy, our offense can function. Like Anthony Richardson, it was rough. The accuracy is just not there. Let's just give him some time. Just put him on the bench. Let him get healthy. Give him just let him learn. Let him learn behind Flacco. Flacco gets hurt, then put Richardson in. We don't need to force him back. everyone in Indianapolis wants Flacco at the helm for this team. Flacco went 33 for 44 for 359 yards and 3 touchdowns while adding 3 carries for 22 yards. He did lose a fumble. He was slinging it, man. Alec Pierce, Mo Alley Cox, Michael Pittman Jr., those are the 3 guys who had touchdowns. So they did lose to the winless Jaguars, but yeah, I like Flacco. And I think as a guy who has Michael Pittman, I want Flacco to keep being the guy. As high as I was on Anthony Richardson the whole entire offseason. So maybe he still is the guy. I'm holding hope. Daniel Jones, 16% rostered, put up 22 fantasy points on the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks have beat up a lot of bad teams this year. Daniel Jones didn't have his best wide receiver. He made some plays. He ran for 38 yards. He did get sacked 3 times, but Daniel Jones versus the Bengals at home next week, hosting the Bengals. Maybe not a terrible guy if, in your deep league and you have a quarterback on the, who are my, maybe you have Patrick Mahomes need to fill in or Darnold, so those are my quarterbacks. I had Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, Joe Flacco, and Daniel Jones. Quick reminder, today's episode is brought to you by my friends over at Sleeper. Sleeper is the absolute best place to play fantasy football, guys. If your league's not there yet, take it there now. They got the Sleeper Zone where you can check all the scores for all your different leagues, score by score. It's really good, guys. I can't even describe it, but it's the best place to just check your scores for the games, and you can check stats, fantasy score. Really is really good over there at the Sleeper Zone. Also, go over to Sleeper. They got the dynamic payouts. You can multiply your money for a lot. Just keep it going, 100 times that money. Enter promo code DUDES100. They'll match you up to $100. That's over at Sleeper, guys. All right. The rough part. The part you might want to fast forward because this just gives you, they call it a FPTSD, fantasy post. You know what it is. So anyways, the week 5 All-Duds team. And it's bad. It's always bad. But these are the guys that were started over 50% on Sleeper, and they probably lost you your fantasy football matchup. I hate to, rub salt in old wounds, guys, but this is just part of the show. It's all part of the show. Sam Darnold, 4.2 fantasy points. Breece Hall again, 5.2 fantasy points. What are we doing with Breece Hall, guys? It is rough. Devon Achane, 2.2 fantasy points. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say Trent. The guy got hurt. That's understandable. You know who else got hurt? Nico Collins got hurt. And he still had 70-plus receiving yards on 2 catches and a touchdown. That's the way to get hurt, guys. That's the way that doesn't mess up your whole fantasy week. Maybe you lost because of Nico Collins, but he did all he could, and he probably wasn't even your lowest scoring wide receiver. Dontavian Wicks. I vouched for you on this last week, telling people to grab you, telling people you could be played. How do you repay me? You go out there and make it look like Christian Watson should still. Maybe he's just that good of a teammate that he's like, hey, I want Watson to be the guy. I'm going to drop, third down after third down pass. I don't know what the deal is with Dontavian Wicks. I'm sure he'll be back. I thought this was a good spot where he could separate himself from Christian Watson. Now it's kind of like what we thought it was in the offseason. He got Jaden Reed, then, whoever it is that day. Deebo Samuel, 2.5 fantasy points. Ouch, Deebo. And this guy could be on here almost every week. It's been a rough year. Dalton Kincaid. This spot was perfect, Dalton. You had no Khalil Shakir. Keon Coleman, I had him as a guy to play this week. I had him as a sleeper before Khalil Shakir was hurt. But Dalton Kincaid, this was a smash spot for you. I told a lot of people to play you this week. And you go out and get 4.4 fantasy points. You almost made a really good catch right there on the sidelines out of bounds, but you didn't. And that would have probably got you 2 to 3 more points. But that's not why we drafted you, Dalton Kincaid. We drafted you for double-digit fantasy performances. And there's a lot of tight ends that belong in this spot. Marvin Harrison Jr., 4.6 fantasy points. That is your week 5 all-dud team, brought to you by our friends over at Trophy Smack. Go to www.trophysmack.com/dudes, 15% off your whole entire order, guys. Trophy Smack, they got last place ribbons, first place trophies. You can customize anything, guys. They got helmets, busts of Patrick Mahomes, all that good stuff for your fantasy football league. Next, running back waiver wire ads. On my running back waiver wire ads, Tank Bigsby. I know he did have a 65-yard touchdown run, but he still had a 65-yard touchdown run. Plus, he had another touchdown run. 13 carries, 101 yards, 30 fantasy points. Last week versus Houston, he had 9. They're traveling to Chicago, good old Chi-Town. It kind of feels like, I don't have snap percentages yet, but maybe hot hand. I know Etienne's been dealing with the shoulder injury. Tank Bigsby looked too good today to not get the ball more and maybe make this a committee, maybe a 50-50 timeshare. Just because Etienne's hurt, the shoulder, it's not fun to play running back with a shoulder injury, but Tank looked really good. I think there's a role for him in this offense to, grind out these games. Next on my list, this one makes me mad because I said on my week 5 preview, hey, if you don't have a running back, I think you can play Roschon Johnson, and got ridiculed for it. What's he do? 14 fantasy points. He had 10 attempts for 25 yards, but 2 touchdowns. Life, death, and DeAndre Swift not being able to punch it in. If the field is only 99 yards, DeAndre Swift would be Barry Sanders of our era. But it's not. It's 100 yards. So Roschon Johnson, Vultures, 2 touchdown passes from DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift still had a good game. You're happy about it. If you would have had another touchdown out of him, I think you would have been even happier. Justice Hill, 53% rostered. I know he didn't have a great game against Cincinnati. They are playing the Commanders. They're hosting the Commanders next week. And if they get into a shootout with the Commanders, Justice Hill might be a little bit more of the guy for, pass plays, stuff like that. They either use him or they don't use him. I don't have the snap percentages yet. As of his fantasy points, only scoring 3 today. Don't think they really used him. And this was weird this week doing running backs because the 2 guys that I thought were the absolute slam dunks waiver wire ads are on a bye. So if you're a team that really needs some help, a bye is not really going to help you right away. You know what I mean? We don't want a Band-Aid. We want to be fixed, or maybe we do want a Band-Aid. We want a waiver Band-Aid. It's what we want. We don't want surgery where we got to wait 2 weeks before we're back to ourselves. So handcuffs for the week. I got Ty Chandler, 36% rostered. Aaron Jones did leave the game hurt. Aaron Jones gets hurt a lot, guys. Ty Chandler, it's at a good time for Aaron Jones with the bye, but Ty Chandler could be the guy who could see his role really increase. Then I have Jalen Wright, he was one of the few bright spots for the Dolphins today. I think he had 8 fantasy points, filling in for Chan. He is 20% rostered, again, going on a bye. Then Jeremy McNichols, he is the 3rd option in this rotation, and the games are kind of getting away from him. So the Commanders have 2 running backs that are good. McNichols did find the end zone in the 3rd quarter, but I still think it's Eckler and Brian Robinson Jr. are the guys. Jeremy McNichols, if one of those guys gets hurt, you're going to wish you had him. He has back-to-back games with double-digit fantasy points. They are playing the Ravens this week, though, so that is a tough matchup, I will say. Throwing it over to our wide receivers, guys, I have Allen Lazard again. This guy just lives on this list. He has had 1 game this year where he's finished under 8 fantasy points. Other than that, he's had 23, 12, 8, and 11. He is wide receiver 19 on the season. This guy should be rostered. Rodgers barely missed him on a touchdown this game. His numbers would be a lot better if he would have had that touchdown. They are playing the Buffalo Bills next week. Lazard has 4 TDs on the season, 47% rostered. He's a guy that Aaron Rodgers really likes. Next guy on my list, I have Jalen Tolbert, 17% rostered. Brandon Cooks is on the IR. Tolbert was a big part in the Cowboys win tonight versus the Steelers. He had 10 targets, 7 receptions, 87 receiving yards, 1 touchdown. He got hit in the, what's the right word? He took a football to a bad place. They had to call a timeout. He ended up coming back, catching a touchdown after that. So big play for Jalen Tolbert right there. Biggest play. He was a guy that has kind of had some hype for a while this year. This was his 3rd double-digit fantasy point game this year. So Tolbert is getting better. With Brandon Cooks on the IR, the Cowboys are playing Detroit next week, which should be a shootout. I think Jalen Tolbert's a good waiver wire ad this week, and maybe should even be put above Allen Lazard at the moment. But Lazard's been doing it longer, and he's been with Aaron Rodgers a lot longer. But Tolbert was kind of the guy that worked out with Dak all offseason, while CD Lamb was on his holdout. Next, I have Xavier Legette. I know he left the game with a shoulder injury. I don't know the status completely of how long he's out, but I also think you can add Jonathan Mingo if you have to. Check out the Panthers, Mingo or Xavier Legette, depending if he plays. He is 54% rostered. He had a big game against Cincinnati. They're playing the Falcons this week, so could be a game where they need to put some points. Dalton can put these guys in the position to have a good game. Chicago was a little rough for the offense, but hopefully he's back soon. And if not, I think you can add Mingo in deep leagues. Next, I have Josh Downs and Alec Pierce. Both these guys are under 50% rostered. As long as Joe Flacco is quarterback, I think you can give Josh Downs and Alec Pierce a shot. You can throw them in your lineup if you absolutely need it. Josh Downs has back-to-back games with double-digit points, and Alec Pierce just comes up with crazy catches. You saw that one where he brought in with one hand and he tipped it and fell down, caught on his back. As long as Flacco's on this team, I feel fine throwing guys in there and playing them. Tight ends, the fun part. I have Cade Otton, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He had an okay game on Thursday night. Nothing crazy. He's 45% rostered, 5.9 fantasy points. Tough matchup against the Saints. Cade Otton always seems to be available on this list. Tight ends are getting rough. Mo Alley-Cox did catch a touchdown today. 4 targets, 2 receptions. He is 0% rostered, 10 fantasy points today. Have not had any fantasy points since week 2. Probably only deep leagues. Add Mo Alley-Cox. Guy did have a touchdown. We'll see if Flacco maybe keeps going to him. This is more of a watch, not a plug and play guy. Then Theo Johnson. New York Giants had 7 fantasy points versus the Seahawks today. 5 targets, 5 receptions, 48 yards. With Neighbors out, not sure if those targets will be there. They probably won't be there, but with Daniel Jones getting the rhythm with these guys, maybe it can lead to something else. These are very deep tight end plays, guys. That's all I got for today, guys. I got my quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends are bleak right now. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a comment, give us a like, give us a subscription. Any questions you have, leave them here on YouTube. I'll be sure to get back to those as soon as I can. You guys have a good day. We will see you on Thursday. And as always, take care.
This has been another episode of the Fantasy Football Dudes podcast. Remember to rate, review, and follow. For more information, go to www.thefantasyfootballdudes.com. And remember, we are sorry for absolutely nothing.